Bienvenidos, worldwide fans of our planet's hottest entertainment with an edge. Jaime En Fuego here, welcoming you to my namesake program, Enfuegotainment. Damn Reezy, call me Fuego for short. And if you are tuning in on a Monday, or seeing this at least later on in the week, this is Animated Mondays. This is something that I do to take a bit of a gander away from the live action and specifically at more adult-themed animation. And so, yes, previous installments have been stuff like heavy metal, the 70s French kind of psychedelic sci-fi film Fantastic Planet. So I will probably eventually veer into, I guess, more tame, which you would expect animation to be, you know, I don't know, maybe some Disney stuff here or there. Maybe I'll do something like the Black Cauldron, I don't know. But bottom line, I like to explore edgier animation with this new showcase on my channel here. And this is about none other than Ralph Bakshi's, I believe, none other than Wizards, his 1976 psychedelic fantasy, just, I mean, on-the-nose allegory. I mean, there's a lot going on in this film. Not all of it works. This is one that I saw probably about 15 years ago, and I had bought it. I, you know, blazed up and watched and was amused to a degree. Visually, especially, this film is just as impressive upon a revisit, and it interestingly melts together so many different aspects of just both animation and like using live action footage and then going over it with additional animation. I mean, and this is long before the whole, you know, Waking Light and Scanner Darkly and, you know, stuff started to do it like, you know, that approach, although that's completely distinctive and different in its own right. But, I mean, Bakshi, he went on to do the animated Lord of the Rings. He did Blue and Ice, I want to say. It's another medieval kind of thing. I haven't seen that one, but I'm definitely curious about checking it out. He also did a live action and animated hybrid called Cool World that I remember had a young Brad Pitt in it, if I recall correctly. But this was his first time actually doing something that wasn't very satirical, kind of urban-esque almost, I guess you could say, because this is the same guy responsible for FRITZ THE CAT. Yeah, so that was definitely a film, you know, being X-rated and everything. It had a lot of different stuff to say. Not all of it worked in that particular aspect either, but I mean, Wizards is very Lord of the Rings inspired in my estimation, but the interesting thing about it is that it's post-apocalyptic. And so essentially the setup is that the world is devastated by 5 different terrorist nuclear bombings, and it takes thousands of years for all of the radiation and stuff to clear out enough for just any form of civilized life to start really coming out and starting to properly repopulate. And I mean, very much in the sentiment of a lot of medieval fantasy, you've got fairies and elves, and then on the other side of the moral spectrum, you know, you've got these mutants that still live in areas that have been, you know, ravaged by all of that radiation, and you know, then you've got orcs and ogres and just all that different stuff, man. And it really, the crux of the conflict comes down to the fact that there are these 2 brothers who are birthed. One is named Avatar, he is the good one, and then you've got Black Wolf, who is the just nefarious evil brother. So of the twins, you've got the yin and the yang, as all too often happens. And so, yeah, one being good, he entertains his mother, and, you know, just with, you know, kind of just amusing magic and stuff like that, and then Black Wolf is torturing small animals and just being a real bastard. And the mother eventually dies, and then her being the ruler, the conflict is first put forth, and yeah, it's Black Wolf versus Avatar. Black Wolf is defeated and goes into isolation and, you know, exile and everything, and it starts an evil kingdom called Scorched, and, you know, it's its own thing. But this is where the animation really shines in my estimation, because of the fact that those combinations that I mentioned, all of the backstory we get with these beautiful stills of animation, just like basic, just awesomely done drawings, and yet the camera just kind of veers and pushes in and stuff, and it's all voiceover, you know, with this like sweetly voiced female narrator, and so that's where we have those breaks constantly in the film where it just goes to these stills as opposed to just being moving animation and everything. And so that's where a lot of the plot is pushed forward, and I know some are against the narrator aspect. They feel like if you have to like spoon feed the viewer, it just doesn't really work as well. But I do think with this sort of medieval fantasy storytelling and stuff, it does in fact work well. But the big controversial aspect probably in this film is the way Black Wolf finally gets the upper hand against not just Avatar, but basically everybody on the good side of things, so he can take like much more over. And he discovers old Nazi propaganda. This is something people have major mixed feelings about, because he finds these old reels of film, and even beyond that, once he starts like just indoctrinating and brainwashing his forces so they're not super like pussies like they had been in previous versions of trying to attack and assassinate, and just not being being poorly led, in all honesty, not supremely inspired. He also starts to discover old technologies, and he's like getting tanks together, all of these different weapons from civilization thousands of years before. And this is where the whole coming full circle thing, Wheel of Cause sort of situation, I'll definitely say that I'm trying to remember when Stephen King first published The Gunslinger, the original Dark Tower book. I believe it was 1978 was when he started publishing those installments but I mean, he had been thinking about it for many years before this film came out. But it makes me wonder if there was a slight bit of inspiration, at least some of those aspects about the world having moved on, and it's in this medieval state, but there is still remnants of an old, more developed culture, especially as far as weapons and stuff like that go. Heavily explored in Wizard and Glass specifically, with just the weapons that are being used for this particular conflict in Hambry and everything. And that's a story for another day. But nonetheless, it's interesting to see it explored here. I like that whole post-apocalyptic thing of stuff just kind of moving back. It pretty much happened in the Dark Ages, when there had been so much technological advancement, and then things veered backwards. And I still remember talking with a couple school teachers when back when I was in high school, and they were like, yeah, if not for the fact that technology and just knowledge wasn't able to continue advancing, and we regressed so far back with the Dark Ages and the destruction of so much information and advancement and everything, that you kids probably would have been taking field trips to the moon right now in the 90s as opposed to where we're at. And so arguable, obviously, but it's a plot point that, while I've seen before, it's definitely it was probably a lot fresher in 1976 when this film came out. And so yeah, he's got this new war machine that he's putting together, and so Avatar has to team up with a elf and with a fairy who is hilariously animated. She is wearing like this nothing outfit that just barely covers her tatas, and that she's got like basically THO the entire time, which is very funny. The nipples are incredibly defined, and yet her character is kind of annoying. That's the thing, that whereas this is a visual feast for me as far as so much that's going on, and I do like the actual mythology and the storytelling, but the script, and most notably the dialogue and the choice of voice actors and their approach to what's going on, is what doesn't work for me about this movie. I know it's a cult classic, I'm sure some people appreciate it, but there's a disparity of tone here that, with the seriousness of the subject matter, doesn't mesh very well. We actually have slapstick comedy at various points. I mean, the evil enemy, these forces that are being inspired by, the Reich and everything, there's a couple who are like bumbling comic relief, like, what are we doing? It's that bad and stupid, really. And it just, when you veer from very serious war scenes with like blood and destruction and everything. And I will say, you know, the Lord of the Rings inspiration is definitely apparent in a lot of those battles, because it's only PG rated, but there was no PG-13 rating in 1976. That wasn't created till, I mean, post Temple of Doom in the 80s, and so we're talking a number of years later, like almost 10 years later, I want to say, somewhere in that range. And so, yeah, it's definitely adult animation with a lot of the themes and stuff, but I feel like that stupid comic relief slapsticky shizzle, it was there for kids, and yet this is not really animated for kids, in my opinion. So it's, once again, a disparity of tone there, too, that doesn't always work. And I really don't like the voice acting of Avatar. He's just like, he's calling the fairy love interest of his abroad and stuff, and we're just like, what's going on? And I don't know. Another thing I do have to make mention of is I love the soundtrack to this. It's very of the era for sure, but it's got a 70s psychedelic funk sort of feel to it that I dig the hell out of, and it does veer from these like funkier battle scene scored bits to just more tender, kind of what you would expect in Lord of the Rings, with, you know, just as we forge forward with the journey, and you know, just trying to, I'm not trying to spoil a ton. That's why I've only really given the setup and maybe about the first half or so of what's going on when they go out on this journey to try to, you know, just stop Black Wolf and everything. And so this is a very interesting film. It's very much an artifact of its time, when animation was really pushing forward with trying to not only cover more adult themes, but also just pushing the technology forward and being creative with just melding all kinds of different approaches together into the visual experience. And I appreciate the heck out of them for doing that. It's very visually effective, it's sonically effective, it's got deep, cool mythology. I think that they did a graphic novel at one particular point, and Ralph is even the director who went on to do all those other things that I mentioned. He's even said that he has been trying to get a script together for Wizards 2 for a long time. And he's 81 now, so even though he was just talking about it as recently as a couple years ago, fingers firmly crossed for all of you devotees to this film. I don't particularly foresee it happening, but hey man, I mean, Ridley Scott and Clint Eastwood are still directing, so who the hell knows? I mean, it's not... When you direct an animated film, you're very much so overseeing the process of an enormous team of animators and everything, and so it would really be strength of script and you know, various other things. Obviously, we couldn't have the same Avatar comeback, but there's a lot of voice actors that can mimic and emulate and do a damn good job with that. So who knows, guys? Maybe your wishes, you know, will be answered, and we could see Wizards 2 at some particular point before, you know, Raph. That's Raph a little too Raph. Anyway, and see Ralph's vision as he describes as being madness for Wizards 2. Madness, sheer madness, or something to that effect coming into play. But if you've never seen this movie, it's a trip, man. You know, it's only 80 minutes. It feels beyond its runtime. It meanders in the middle, for sure. And there is a lot of retread of certain scenes, and, you know, a lot of the silliness doesn't work. But if you like medieval fantasy, and especially if you like what at the time was most definitely groundbreaking animation, I recommend Wizards. I don't love it, but I'm super glad, I'm stoked in fact, that I revisited this one today. So, I'm En Fuego. You can find moi on all social media sectors, just like you see spelled below, at Jaime En Fuego, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube. My personal channel here is primarily the non-scary stuff. If you go to youtube.com/The Horror Show channel, that's where, if you're here, you've probably seen me on there. I mean, I've got not even a Jeezy here, and we've got almost 33,000 subscribers over there, so it's a much different territory. That's where we do the scarific and the spooktacular trailer reactions, just reviews of everything, video games, movies, television, we do Let's Plays, you know, unboxings, all kinds of cool stuff. And then here is where I stick more to like science fiction and fantasy, comedy, comic book stuff back when those were still being released in the theaters. It's crazy. But yes, and also smaller indie art house cinema. I've got a whole series of Star Wars canon coverage that I've been slowly working my way through. So it's a lot of fun on both my personal channel here and also over on the Horror Show. I try to keep it comprehensive, yet separate, and always informative though. So once again, I've been Fuego, y'all have been awesome, and until the Reel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, Cinemigos, and constant readers and viewers alike. I'm hopeful that we get to share more of this palaver sooner rather than later, and until that occurs, remember to stay healthy and to read more movies. Watch them, goddammit. Come on, Fuegs.